Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world. And so much love to each and every one of you. Well, we know now that Shelley is going to the cabin where strange unorthodox events happened to Cordelia's brother and his wife, along with their 2 grandchildren. So she's going to the very same place, and they believed that there might have been a female Bigfoot on the property. So I'm wondering whether we're going to find that Shelley has an encounter all of her own. So let's find out, shall we? But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's continue with the final part of our story tonight. I was not sure whether accepting Cordelia's kind offer was actually a good idea or not. I'd never been to Canada before, and had always been the kind of girl that never appreciated solitude of any kind. I hated being alone in my own company for too long. I loved being around throngs of people. It made me feel safe and secure. I mean, if you fainted on the sidewalk or went into a coronary arrest, someone would invariably always come to your aid, and then the ambulance would be called onto the scene in a jiffy to rescue you. I couldn't help but feel that hanging out in a lonely cabin in the middle of nowhere with not very much to do, if anything untoward were to happen to me or Titan, help could be a long way in coming, if it came at all. I tried not to think about it too much, or I would almost certainly have refused to accept Cordelia's very gracious offer. I had seen some enchanting-looking pictures of the town of Banff before, and learnt about the mystical turquoise waters of Lake Louise. But although I appreciated nature from a distance, I wasn't certain I wanted to wake up in the morning, swaddled by tall lofty trees and mountainous valleys, where there was no longer the sound of traffic or the honk of a taxi horn, that were for me extremely reassuring noises that I had become accustomed to over the years. When I put Cordelia's suggestion to Titan about us going away to stay at her late husband's cabin, he brightened up significantly, and the defeated look in his face seemed to lift. He looked like someone who'd been stranded out at sea for a month or so, and was about to give up on being rescued. But Cordelia's idea was like the lifeboat that had appeared on the scene and had come to take him home, saving him from perishing in the big blue ocean.
"Why did I not think of that idea before?" he said. "Cordelia's absolutely right about this. I need a change of scene. And a cabin near Banff, well, it sounds brilliant. I think with that magnificent countryside, some brisk, healthy walks in the fresh air, well, that will serve wonderfully to brush away some of the cobwebs that have been clouding my creativity for so long."
"You think that Cordelia's right about this, do you?" I asked. "You think you'll be able to write better if we're in the middle of nowhere?"
"I haven't been telling you the complete truth," Shelley said Titan. "I didn't want to worry you, because it would only end up stressing you out. And since we've been trying very hard for a baby, I didn't want to make matters worse for us. You heard what the doctor said. He believed the stress of daily life was stopping you from conceiving. I didn't want to add to the problems, so that's why I didn't reveal just how bad my writer's block has become."
"You're scaring me, Titan. What are you saying? What do you mean by you haven't been telling me the truth exactly?"
"Just that. The writer's block has been a major problem for me, Shelley, over the last few months or so. If you want to know the truth, I've written absolutely nothing."
"I don't understand. I didn't know it was as bad as that. You told me you sent your synopsis to Nikki ages ago. What do you mean you've written nothing? When you say nothing, you mean nothing, do you?"
"I mean nothing. I've had absolutely no inspiration. And Nikki is on my back all the time, almost as if she senses something's up with me. She's behaving very suspiciously. She keeps asking me how the book is coming along. I need to have it finished soon, and I've barely started it. Well, I haven't started it. That's what I really mean. I don't like lying to Nikki at all, but I felt far too ashamed to tell her the truth, that I can't think of anything to write about, that nothing is coming."
At this I stared at my husband in absolute confoundment, placing both hands on either side of my head, as if trying to block out what he was telling me. "You're joking, right?" I can't understand you, Titan. You really haven't progressed with your novel at all. And we've already received an advance for it from the publisher. I wish you had told Nikki about this and what was going on with you. I'm sure she'd have sympathised with your plight, given you more time to work on your novel. You've made things 1,000 times worse for the both of us by lying to her like this and telling her that everything is going swimmingly. This is crazy. I had no idea things were this bad.
I wish I was joking, love. And you're right, I shouldn't have lied to Nikki. But I couldn't help myself. She was so excited about the synopsis I sent her. I think we should go to Cordelia's cabin. What harm can it do? I mean, I'm stressing out significantly about the book I'm writing, and that's succeeding in stalling my progress all the more. But think about it, a little relaxation and some quality fresh air. Well, I might be able to bite the bullet in some way and be inspired to write again, without putting undue pressure on myself. I'm willing to try absolutely anything at this point. How do you feel about us going to Cordelia's late husband's cabin?
Look, if it's going to help you, Titan, to be more creative, then we better go, I said in resignation. It's not like I've got a choice in the matter, have I? I have to support you in any way I can, because that's what a wife does. But if the truth be told, I think it's going to be horribly lonely for me at the cabin. But Cordelia believes it might do me the world of good. She thinks the peace and quiet might actually help me successfully conceive. So maybe our going there, she thinks we might kill 2 birds with 1 stone. She thinks you might be able to write, and I may potentially fall pregnant.
Well, she makes a good point there, said my husband with a twinkle in his eyes.
On the day we arrived at Cordelia's cabin, the first thought that came to my mind is, what the hell had we done? Was I really going to be living in this cabin in the middle of nowhere for 2 weeks without any Wi-Fi connections and feeling completely cut off from the rest of the world? I felt biliously sick to my stomach. I suddenly felt vulnerable, very aware of how isolated we both were. I could hear the whisper of the wind in the trees, the chirrups of the birds' song, but there were no signs of traffic, no human beings crossing the road, no ambulance sirens blaring, no indignant horns blowing from the yellow taxicabs. Everything was so desperately quiet. Titan's positive reaction to the cabin was completely different to mine. His enthusiasm was as boundless as an excitable puppy dog that had been given a brand new toy to play with. Certainly, his reaction to our new abode was encouraging for me, but I knew for the next couple of weeks or so that we would be cut off from civilization. And maybe that was a good thing, because maybe Titan would accomplish writing his book out here. And if that were the case, coming here would not be a train smash after all. Titan's eyes widened. He stared at the mesmerizing, very pretty scenery that surrounded us, as if he was feasting his eyes on the most beautiful scene he'd ever beheld. He wasn't wrong, of course, as we were undeniably staying in the most idyllic part of the world, where the smouldering mountains and their undulating curvaceous signatures, dipped in white frosting, unabashedly plunged their mischievous contours into a sky that was made of blue chocolate. There was no other way to describe it. The trees were like hundreds of lollipops covered in rounded heads that were viridescently ablaze with a fire of green leaves. And among this rich collection of abundantly lush scenery, there were evergreen trees that looked like the loftiest Christmas trees that you have ever beheld, that were so large they would be far too big to bring into the house for the festive season. The only thing missing for them was the Christmas baubles and lights. So yes, I couldn't deny that the ravishing beauty spread out before me, like the melting butter on a bagel, was utterly magnificent to behold. I noticed the most gorgeous flowers at the base of the mountain slopes that burgeoned out into fields of pretty colours, and I began to wish with all my heart that I was a good artist, as scenes like this deserved to be painted on canvas. It would seem that despite the lack of Wi-Fi at the cabin, nothing else had been overlooked. The cabin was a generous size, and looked like something you'd possibly find in a fairy tale, where no expense had been spared in making the cabin as luxurious and as cosy as possible. We had hot water, a gas range oven, a gas refrigerator, along with a store cupboard, a freezer, and even an opulent wine cellar, packed with temptations that the super rich can always enjoy. so we certainly weren't going to go hungry or thirsty here. But I was going to feel extremely lonely. I was certain of that one fact. Despite the fact that I'd married a writer, I had never been much of a reader myself, but I promptly realised that if I wanted the days not to drag by at an agonisingly slow pace, it might be a good idea to start attempting to read a book. I'd make a monumental effort to take some exercise in the woods, but I felt somewhat intimidated about exercising alone, but it couldn't be helped. At least I had Titan's car available for use, and I could make a few trips to Banff to distract myself with a little shopping from time to time. But I certainly didn't hold out much hope that I would enjoy this trip very much. But I kept such reservations to myself, as Titan seemed to have come alive, like a bird with clipped wings that was able to fly again. I will admit the first couple of days spent at the cabin had been laboriously monotonous, exceedingly uneventful and unexciting for me. I was certainly suffering withdrawals from not having a signal on my cell phone and getting no Wi-Fi connection. I had gone for a walk with Titan in the grove a few times, and it had certainly been fun. But then he'd spent the rest of the day locked away in his study, on his computer, writing his story.
You're not going to believe it, Shelley, but Cordelia was absolutely right. It was an incredible idea of hers for me to come here. The ideas just seem to be just burgeoning in my mind. They're blossoming and blooming, and they're just not stopping. And I've got incredible ideas for this novel of mine. I know Nikki is going to be thrilled when she reads this book, because I've got a very good feeling it's going to be a bestseller.
When Titan said this, I knew I wasn't going to see him for days on end, as once he clasped onto a great idea, he seemed to get so caught up in it that sometimes the novel he was creating for himself became more real to him than this current reality, much like in our modern world people who get caught up in computer games, so much so that their own reality diminishes as the world of their computer takes on a life form of its own. I knew coming here had been a great idea for Titan, but on my part, I felt horribly alone. I tried to cut the boredom by taking trips to Banff, which was one of the most beautiful prepossessing towns that I have ever beheld, with charming vintage shops, glorious mountain views, beer barrels and hanging baskets that burst at the seams with colourful displays of flowers. I was able to talk to people in the town and to do a fair bit of shopping on my own, so as not to feel completely isolated. But as the days progressed, the boredom receded, and I began to enjoy the peace and quiet of this new way of living. I had always felt safer surrounded by the hustle and bustle of a busy city, but the contrast of being out here in nature took quite a lot of adjustment for me. I had found a book to read, and I was beginning to thoroughly enjoy it and really get stuck into it. It was the first time in a long time that I had read anything at all. One day, while my husband was comfortably tucked at his desk in his office, a team of cleaners from the Chalet Maids Company had arrived to clean the cabin, as they did religiously once a week for Cordelia. You would have thought I would have welcomed that human interaction with these seemingly very nice ladies, but I didn't. Besides anything else, they were here to clean, not to entertain me. Indeed, I felt somewhat annoyed that they were here, as their intrusive presence was inconvenient. I had decided to take a walk in the grove to get away from the cleaners. I knew I would feel uncomfortable if I had to get in their way. I was really missing my Maltese poodle back at home, but I was glad that Cordelia was taking charge over him. I knew my little dog would possibly be intimidated by the endless open stretches of countryside out here. I had lost track of what day it was, which has never happened to me before, as when you live in a city you remember the date, the day and the time, as well as all the important schedules you are required to meet. But out here I had forgotten about all those things that had lost their relevance and importance, rather like an onion that has discarded its outer layer and no longer has an attachment to it. I had taken a few leisurely walks in the grove with my husband Titan, when he wasn't writing his book and needed some exercise. But this was the first time I was going to attempt walking through this labyrinth of trees on my own. But now that I'd taken a few walks with Titan over the last week or so, I wasn't exercising my former reticence, so I easily sashayed through the grove with an effortless confidence, something I would never have attempted doing on my own a week before. On this beautiful day, as I casually sashayed through the grove, I forgot about the city, the sound of the buses and cars, the noises of the people. Instead, I was tuning into a completely different frequency, and it made me feel extraordinarily exhilarated, as if I was shedding a heavy coat that I'd been wearing for so long, and exchanging it for something a whole lot lighter. I felt energized, along with an inexplicable feeling of happiness in my heart that I'd never experienced before. I realized the natural world was embracing me in a warm, affectionate hug, so the feelings of being isolated and alone seemed to abandon me. For how long I walked in the grove I do not know, nor did I actually care at the time. I had lost track of the time, and it really didn't matter when I got back to the cabin anyway, as Titan was probably tapping away at his computer to his heart's content, fully absorbed in his work. I was sure the chalet maids had long since left by now. For some reason I was in no hurry to return to the cabin. I mean, what was the rush anyway? I felt peaceful, serene and content, more than I had done for a long time. And then it happened, a moment when my peace was cruelly extinguished like the flame from a firefly. I had been distracted by a magnificently beautiful, seemingly rare bird that I had seen perching on a high tree branch, and I had walked forward, tipping my neck up to examine it on the branch, for the bird seemed rather tame. I had failed to realize that a log lying embedded between some rambling foliage was about to trip me up, and I had fallen forward and twisted my ankle so badly that I had winced in pain. The bird had promptly flown away. If I had done this on a street in New York, I am almost certain some kindly soul would have helped me up to my feet and ensured I got home safely. I was glad I hadn't heard a snap, so thankfully I hadn't broken anything. I pulled off my shoe and sock, wincing in pain as I examined my swollen ankle. It looked like there was a huge golf ball developing under my skin there. I tried to get to my feet, keeping one of my feet bare, because it was so swollen by now. It probably wouldn't fit back in the shoe anyway. Every step I took down the trail was agonizingly painful. I knew I wasn't going to make any real progress at this rate. I did try, though, at a snail's pace, to move myself steadily down the woodland paths. Some dipped with angry crevices and cracks that were so jarring on my ankle that they only accentuated the pain. I knew Titan would be so absorbed in his work, he wouldn't even realize I was missing. I became unduly alarmed when darkness descended across the valley, as if a dimmer switch was rapidly turning itself down. I was now beginning to panic. I didn't want to be stuck in the woods at the dead of night, as anything could be out here. How I wished that Titan wasn't so busily absorbed in his work at the moment, because then he'd have realized that I hadn't come back to the cabin and would go out looking for me. But he only made a showing when he got hungry, and Titan, when he was in the zone like he was at the moment, could easily forget about eating altogether. When would he realize I wasn't back at the cabin and come out looking for me, I wondered. I felt a heaviness descend across my heart, as all hope of being rescued drained away, rather like the water out of a kitchen sink. All of a sudden, as I was dragging my foot across the ground, I heard a voice. Was that Titan, I wondered, hope bounding enthusiastically in my heart like an exuberant puppy. Titan, is that you? I called out. I'm over here. I think I've sprained my ankle. I can barely walk. I'm hobbling along at a snail's pace. I cried out, but there was no response. The voice I heard dissipated rather like the smoke leaving a chimney. Then I heard the voice again. Hello, I called out. Is anybody there? Is anybody there? I need help. I've sprained my ankle. Once again I was only met with the sounds of the crickets and frogs. Even though I'd heard the voice, I sensed I was definitely not alone. Someone was there. Someone was watching me from the shadows, and I wasn't sure whether I should be alarmed or not. I tried to step up my speed, but it was no use. My foot was spasming in pain, and I nearly tripped again. And that was when I saw her. She was standing only feet away from me, and with the moonlight trickling across her face, I could see her genuine concern in her eyes, and it was so discernible that it completely hijacked any fear I might have had. She was, without doubt, incredibly intimidating. Words cannot describe how gargantuan she was in size, for she stood up on 2 feet at about 9.5 foot tall. Her shoulders were ponderous, her proportions robust, her breasts extremely small, her body covered in long dark hair. I realized to my astonishment that I was staring at a female Bigfoot. I was confounded by this unlikely encounter, so much so that my mouth dropped to the ground. For a moment the female Bigfoot allowed me to take her in. She stared at me with an inquisitive gaze, her eyes dropping to my swollen naked foot. Then she spoke to me in a language I couldn't understand, but miraculously it translated itself into my head in English. Kikakwila muka, ilati kwasa. I'm Muka, she said. I see you can't walk. Would you like some help? I knew I could trust Muka instinctively. She had more compassion than some people I have known over the years of my life. There was something so extremely motherly and maternal about her. I may not be on a New York subway getting help from a complete stranger, but I was in a sequestered wooded area, and help had arrived in the most unlikely of ways. I'm not sure if I responded to Muka in any way, or articulated any thoughts, but Muka didn't even hesitate. Before I knew it, she was at my side, and had promptly thrown me over her shoulders. She ran with me on her back at an effortless ease, putting me on the ground outside the cabin door. And then she said to me, Katikwasi, lumpota safa, gonsakwi. You're going to have a baby in 9 months' time. It's going to be a girl. Congratulations. Muka then turned around and glided away. It took me several days to recover from my sprained ankle, but I'm glad to say that when we returned to New York, my husband had virtually completed his book, and it did become a bestseller as he predicted. And as Muka had said to me, in 9 months I did indeed have a baby girl, and believe it or not, I chose to call her Muka. It took me a long while to tell Cordelia and Titan about my strange encounter with a Bigfoot in the woods, and why I had chosen to call my girl Muka. But Cordelia was soon to learn that yes, there really was a Bigfoot in the woods. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.